I agree with the statement from Kiharu Member of Parliament, Ndindi Nyoro, that there is no need of using taxpayers' money to bail out state corporations and companies that are not adding value to the economy. And the Kenya Kwanza government are right with that premise to mount a move to privatize those companies. And in between the lines, something is very suspicious. We've always said, and that has been my personal position, that we can have good ideas and good proposals on how to run this country, but we need to do the right thing to do them. For example, the process should never be suspicious. Why am I saying? In this video, I want us to look at the new privatization bill that was taken to that was sponsored by the state and is supposed to be taken to Parliament after recess, that has been at the center of a controversy between and have drawn Martha Karua into it with Ndindi Nyoro, and I think Ndindi Nyoro went out to public to respond to Martha Karua's statement on the issue. So for those who don't know, this is what is going on. Kenya Kwanza, the Kenya Kwanza government are saying that there are state companies that are not making profit and they're not adding strategic value to the economy or to the people of Kenya, so that there is no need of government pumping money in them, in these state corporations. So what they are saying is that they want to privatize those companies, and no one seems to have a problem with that. The problem here is they took a bill to the National Assembly so that that privatization process is done by two bodies, by two institutions, the National Treasury and the Privatization Commission. The National Treasury is an extension of the executive. So what that bill says that it's removing the Parliament from that process. So National Treasury Privatization Commission will just do midwife the process, and maybe after getting the nod from the cabinet, and it will remove the input of the Parliament in that process. What used to happen before is that the Treasury was required to submit a report in form of a sessional paper on a privatization proposal approved by the cabinet to the National Assembly for consideration. So after Treasury imeandika barua, that sessional paper inapeleka bunge. Ikishaenda bunge, the Parliament sits on they sit for on a parliamentary committee which discusses, and it is passed there. Remember, it is privatization of a public property. So that parliamentary committee, before it's tabling in the National Assembly for approval. After that, they will take it and it will be approved by the National Assembly. What are we saying? We have a representation democracy where our voices are represented in the state by the leaders we choose, the member of parliament William Nyorichagua. And then Martha Karua is saying that what we are doing, removing the oversight role of the parliament in that process, is suspicious, because we are not, we cannot give it to the president and the cabinet, because president is the head of executive, the cabinet, the treasury, and the privatization authority, which are all under executive, to midwife the process. Because if they're in charge of the process, there is a risk in it. And what is interesting, I listened to Ndindi Nyoro defending it, today, but he's not telling you about the bill. He's just selling the discussion on the privatization. And this is what happens. I want you to listen to it. He was actually saying that he was speaking to someone, he was saying, only saying that government is privatizing because we are not getting profit. Okay, hiyo ni kitu simple yenye hata mtoto mdogo akisikia atajua sawa. Hii biashara kama ifanye biashara haileti profit, si unafaa ufunge. But what they are not saying in public is why they are removing parliament from that process. I want you to listen to Ndindi Nyoro here.
We have over 300 government agencies, corporations, companies. Over 330 actually, precisely 334. Most of them make money. Most of them are regulators. Most of them, unfortunately, hemorrhage money. In every responsible, it is the plan of every responsible government that you cannot continue to entertain a company that makes losses, does not hold any strategic value for the government, to continue gobbling taxpayers' money. And therefore, it is the wisdom of the president and this government that the Kenyan people cannot continue carrying the road of parastatals, of government companies that have not been making money in any recent past. And therefore, I want to put it categorically. It is not the business of government to be doing business. The business of government is to facilitate business.
But if that is it, you're also saying that there are parastatals that are making money. So at the end of the day, government is still doing business. And what is wrong with the government getting money from this business? I don't get it, because at the end of the day, a state is not in vacuum. Government is led by people who have commercial interests. So making this process look like a saint and that it has nothing to do with individuals, I think is not it. And what Ndindi Nyoro is saying is rightfully so, that no one wants to pump money there. But then if it has not been making profit, how much do we pump there?
The business of government is to enable businesses. And the other business of government is to regulate business. And therefore, it is the wisdom of the Kenyan people collectively, through the sovereign and especially the president, that all these companies that do not make any strategic value to government be sold away to the private sector to manage. And you know, ultimately, the government is a 30% shareholder of every business in Kenya, because corporate tax in Kenya is 30%. And therefore, government does not need to own any active stake in any company, because either way, they share in the profits of all the businesses.
Sounds good. It's a very good plan. But then something is amiss. Otherwise, if you sell the regulator, okay, if you sell a company that regulates, for example, we have a company like Kenya Power. Kenya Power enjoys monopoly and it's under government. So if you leave strategic sectors to be led by individuals, we run at a risk. Ladies and gentlemen, listening to Ndindi Nyoro, what he's not telling you is that that privatization they want to do, they don't want parliament to get involved in it. I'm like, what is the urgency? Because I was reading, was it People Daily? I think I was reading Business Daily. I think the story is well elaborated on Business Daily. They're saying they're removing parliament from that process so that they reduce the bureaucracy, they reduce the process, they fast track that process. Nothing new. This is not the first time we are privatizing. Former President Mwai Kibaki privatized 6 companies. That is KenGen, Kenya Insurance, Safaricom, Mumias Sugar, through the Nairobi Stock Exchange between 2003 and 2008. He also sold Telecom Kenya shares through a strategic sale and leased out to Railways, Kenya Railways Corporation through a concessionaire. Now, Kenya privatized 8 companies through public offers from 1990 to 2002. So this is not something that is new. Now, during Moi era, including CMC Holding, National Bank, and Kenya Airways. So, what Kenya Kwanza is saying is that if they had to go through parliament, it's going to take long. I'm like, the government have the machinery to fast track everything in the National Assembly. If they wanted to pass a bill, the IBC Amendment Bill, how long did it take? We were even recess. We had to call a special sitting faster. And within 7 days, President is already signing in the State House. So that I don't buy the narrative that if you involve Parliament in it, it's going to take long. Okay, how urgently is it? How urgently should we do the sales? Do you want to do it one off? I think even if it has to go through the Treasury, it is supposed to be a process. And while we complain about bureaucracy, do you mean that Parliament has lost its value as an oversighter, as a body that oversights executive? And clearly, this bill usurps the powers of Parliament. I'm waiting to see how MPs are going to react, because I know on this one, Kenya Kwanza and Azimio, things are going to be divided. But it's a very interesting one. Do you think we should involve Parliament, or why are we removing them? And we elected them, and that is what they're supposed to do. So when we remove them, we remove the stake there. It's a bit of a challenge. Now, I want to look at it on economic perspective and political perspective. And in economical perspective, national resale will be, or rather, this is it. Privatization policy, I think, needs to be reviewed. Because if it's not reviewed, then we are going to inject foreigners here. Simple question. Who are you going to sell to? Are we going to sell to local investors so that they manage, or we are going to sell to foreigners? So we need to know that privatization policy, the framework of doing it, the legal framework of privatizing those companies need to be reviewed, so that we make sure that as much as we are selling, we are giving now government companies to the public, they are going to inherit structures that were of government. Number one, people who are employed and who are getting their daily bread from those companies are not going to be chased away. Even if you change top management, but those who, so that mtu asipoteze kazi alikuwa napata, there will be no disruption. Number two is on, are we going to inject more foreigners in our market, in our space? Because if we inject more, then hiyo pesa watakuwa nasanya hapa goes there, doesn't remain here. I understand, I agree that government takes 30%. So that policy should be looked at. But pause for a minute. Instead of selling them, Kenya Kwanza is identifying a problem that, not that they are not making profit for any reason, the problem could be management. Why don't you fix that instead of selling them all, so that you also make the profit? If private sector, if you give it to private sector, they can make profit. And you believe if you sell it to the private sector, they can make profit. Then why don't you also review and just do assessment of these some of these parastatals and companies, so that if it is management, you change management. And with that, you get it. That is on the economy in terms of how it's going to work. Now, I want to look at it on political grounds. 3 reasons. National Treasury is an extension of the executive. The process will be handled by few individuals, and without that oversight, I can tell you, it is going to be given out, not even privatized, to people on competitive basis and on other neutrality. The process will lack neutrality. But when the spectrum is long, where there is Treasury, there is National Assembly, you will get to it. So when it's micromanaged, for me, it's because even if the buyer needs to be audited, that ni nani anaweza, because Remember, this is an opportunity for the big boys to grab and run these parastatals. Actually, the big boys are going to buy them themselves. The challenge, when there is an influx of government people working or buying these companies and now running these companies, then it's people who want to make profit. It is going to affect policy formulations on some strategic areas because someone in business would always want to establish a monopolistic market. That's it. So the big boys would run into this, and it has the potential of being abused. Even people who are going to be given these companies will be told, leta hii kickbacks, fanya hii campaign hapa. But someone also says that maybe perhaps the previous regime was pumping money in them. And of course, this needs to be cleaned up because I know that parastatals, state corporations, these are the institutions that are used to swindle the public money. That one for sure, I know. It's not ministry. Kwa sababu ukisikia damu inajengwa iko under irrigation board, ukisikia barabara inajengwa iko under Kenya. So these are the bodies that swindle the government cash. This needs to be cleaned. We totally agree, but we just need to go through the process. That bill, I think it's sinister. That's my take.